I can see you looking at the title, and I know you're already thinking I'm here to bash on the console before it's been released. Don't let that thought permeate your mind. Let's give me a chance, or we're gonna have a chat. And we're gonna just talk about what we currently know, what is currently rumored, and what I think could be a really interesting launch for Nintendo, and what could maybe make it or break it. And hey, if we go along and you have some thoughts and opinions, I'd love to hear them in the comment section down below. Check us out. If you don't know who I am, I'm John. Go by It's PVG. I stream on this channel as well as Twitch, and we're going to talk about the Switch 2. Well, starting off with what we do know versus what are the rumors, we have a few little things that we're able to glean from the actual event itself. I say event, more of the actual trailer. And what we do know is that there are some improvements in the ergonomics and the design of the actual Switch itself. Some of those improvements being the kickstand on the back, which lets for reasonably better deployment of the actual Switch in public. I think you all know and understand that the first one wasn't great. It was there, it was functional, but you know, could have been better. It seems like they have done a lot to improve on that there. On top of that there, they've changed how we dock the Type-C ports itself on the actual Switch itself, including a Type-C port on top, which should be good for, I guess, some charging functionality as well as accessories and whatnot, but we'll see how that actually plays out and what that could actually be potentially used in the future. Again, a lot of the specs are not formalized or released yet, so again, that Type-C port could be a game changer or it could be just a standard way to charge. We'll have to see how it goes. And then on top of that there, the improved controller design, where you now magnetically clip the controllers on the side, looks interesting. Personally, I'm intrigued, given how Apple used Magnatech locks to try and attach things to their iPhones and stuff. If it's using a similar system to that there, it could be intriguing. It could be really good. I know there's some people online are speculating that they're going to be so easily broken and so easily snapped off and so easily wrecked in one way or another. And yes, there is a part of me that does think that could be the case as well, but I'm not exactly fond of how the current Switch's actual design is right now. I won't lie, I'm a little bit annoyed by it. My left Joy-Con doesn't even work anymore because the thing, despite it snapping into place, doesn't even touch the contacts properly and won't charge. It's a bit of a nightmare. It means I now have to either buy new Joy-Cons or just stick to a Pro controller solution, which is not great, especially if you're going to go out and travel with the Switch. You kind of need active working Joy-Cons, and that lack of working functionality on my part, a little bit annoying, but that's a bit of a gripe that I have currently. But those are some of the things we know from the actual reveal trailer as it is. But there has been some rumored spec tech, and how about we get into that right now? So with the rumored specs, it's been kind of a hodgepodge of information, but there is some consistencies we're seeing across the actual internet in regards to leakers and people in the know. Now, some of the places I've been looking at, like the Games Radar and Tech Radar and some of the other sites that we have seen information from, there is some commonalities in what we are expecting from the actual internalized spec. First and foremost is the NVIDIA chip. Again, they are sticking with NVIDIA, unlike what we've seen with the ROG Ally or the Legion from Lenovo and Steam Deck. It's instead of using RDNA AMD chips, we're sticking with an NVIDIA chip. Specifically, it's rumored to be an Ampere chip, which fair enough. I mean, Nintendo has had a working relationship with NVIDIA for a while now. It makes sense. Why not? Especially as, you know, until literally days ago, NVIDIA stock was flowing through the roof. Who would have thought a small little Chinese company would destroy their stock in one go? But that's the AI side of things, which could have an impact on the Switch. We'll talk about that in a little second. But, you know, again, we're sticking with the NVIDIA chip, and based on the amperes power and what has been documented about it, it has basically the specs or the performance of a PS4. That is probably the best layman's terms way we can put that there, because other places like Digital Foundry and whatnot talk about the aspects of teraflops, but realistically, the common average user and consumer does not know what X amount of teraflops equates to, and even myself, I get a little bit confused by what that equates to, and I actually would say that I'm a more advanced power user when it comes to tech and whatnot, and it's a bit of a weird sort of amalgamation of just information, just talking about the teraflops to kind of make it easy enough to consume. Basically, the rumor is it's a PS4 power on its handheld form and a PS4 Pro in its docked form. Not bad. A vast improvement over what we saw within regards to the Switch 1. Maybe not to the greatest degree I wanted to see, but it's going to be hard to try and put a PS5 or an Xbox Series X into a handheld. So there's got to be some real level of realistic expectation in there. Now, how do we see those grounds being made outside of what we would have with regards to just pure raw performative power? Well, the rumor is that we're going to have FSR 3 and DLSS 2 on the actual console. Not too bad, honestly, but there is some worries I do have in there. We've seen the actual release of the 50 series cards from NVIDIA. We're actually on DLSS 4 now rather than 2. So we're 2 generations technically behind if it is going to be DLSS 2, which is not a bad technology, but it's not a technology that I think we're going to see maybe in regards to the utilization of certain frame generation technology we've seen with the 50 series. Now, I could be wrong. There has actually been talk and speculation that they're going to be bringing frame generation technology to the actual 30 cards, or it can be done in the 30 series cards of NVIDIA. And that may be the case, that they can bring frame generation technology into the Switch. Hard to say. I'm not expecting it to happen, but based on what we've seen so far, it's highly unlikely. We're going to probably be stuck with DLSS 2, which is not a bad upskilling model. It does do the job quite well. Now, with regards to that there, we will obviously see less performance than with DLSS 4, but when you factor in that you're going to be using, which is rumored to be around a 78-inch screen, some of the artifacting and some of the jaggies you would see inside of a DLSS 2 upscaled game are not going to maybe be as noticeable on a smaller screen. Certainly if it's docked, we might be able to still notice it here and there, but with the way Nintendo goes about it and the way they're actually able to utilize power consumption as well as performance to basically squeeze out every drop to make their first party games look as amazing as they do, it's unlikely we will see that being a problem. Now, with that there, it does come down to the fact that do we have any concerns when it comes to the battery life? There's always improvements when it comes to the battery life when it comes to these consoles, but with the more and more power hungry tech that we put into these machines, it's hard to say that we're going to get as much performance out of the actual battery spec than we would if we maybe had a little less power heavy or power consumptive APU, but we'll have to see. We'll see what comes to that there. But when it comes to that simple spec of having that Ampere tech and the actual DLSS 2, we could see some really fun and interesting games. Now, again, a PS4 handheld versus a PS4 Pro docked console, a little bit behind the times, but Nintendo has not been cutting edge when it comes to fidelity in their technology and their graphics for years now. The Wii has basically the power of a PS2 when the Xbox 360 and PS3 was out. The Wii U didn't really change too much there, and then the Switch being a generation behind again, or what at least to be as a generation and a half behind each time, it's normal to kind of see these lack of gains or lack of catching up from Nintendo, because they're not necessarily always about providing the most high fidelity console, more that it's an interesting experience. But that then brings in some real interesting questions that we have to look at. Now, I talked about the interesting questions we have to look at, and it comes in the form of potential problems when it comes to the Switch 2. One of the big things, and I've seen even Danny O'Dwyer from NoClip talk about this as well, is that we're seeing a lack of innovation, or the stagnation of what makes Nintendo so intriguing and so interesting in the modern era of video games. Ever since the Wii, they've always tried to push the boundary and try to change how we directly consume our content, especially on their console, with the Wii and motion controls, be it the Wii U with the screen, and then be it the Switch with the combination of basically taking the screen and your controller and wiping out basically their handheld division and no longer having DSs into being one unified adaptive console. But with Switch 2, we don't necessarily see those innovations, or we don't really see the actual jumps in regards to creativity that we normally do see from Nintendo. And to some extent, a lot of people say one way or another that this could be a problem for Nintendo, when realistically, I don't think it will be. But it's not to say that we might not see the same performance when it comes to sales as the Switch 2 versus the Switch 1. On top of that there, we also see a massive outlier of an issue in relation to what we expect from an actual Switch 2 versus what its competition is now. these days we have things like I talked about earlier, the Lenovo Legion, we have the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck. These are all amazingly performative consoles that are actually getting further iterations already inside the ROG space and whatnot. And Valve are talking about maybe an update and a refresh in maybe a year or two time. They actually want that small handheld to age like fine wine, and I think it really is going to do that to some extent. But that then brings into the question, can Nintendo compete inside the handheld market with such stiff competition from a PC handheld perspective? Now, you might say to yourself, well, the problem with PC versus Nintendo is that Nintendo has these amazing IPs, and you're not going to play Mario or Zelda or Kirby on your Steam Deck or your ROG Ally or anything like that there. But I think that completely does not factor in the fact that these small handhelds are already capable of emulating the Switch as it is. And I'm not saying that's legal, and I'm not suggesting you do it. But we can't overlook the fact that these consoles, these small handhelds that are not Nintendo owned, not Nintendo endorsed, are capable, with a little bit of creativity and finagling, are able to produce the similar, if not better, performance results than the current actual Switch console. And if you factor in that they have maybe similar, if not slightly more performative processing power, be able to do that for the Switch too. I think it's something we can't necessarily rule out, and I think there is something to be said for that problem when it comes to the competition space. On top of that, there are the uplift again from the DLSS2, bit of a tongue twister, is going to be there, and it may help Nintendo get above the bar when it comes to the actual performance they can squeeze out of their console with a upscaling and resolution. But it is 2 generations behind, and that is a big problem when it comes to utilization of your dock. They make actual games perform well. It can help, but I don't know if it's going to be the game changer that it needs to be. Ideally, I think we can't say for sure. Again, I need to say this is all speculation. I think if Nintendo's smart, they hopefully have something, a little bit of a surprise in the bag for us, and maybe have something that's actually maybe closer to DLSS4, and that the Ampere chip is maybe a more advanced chip that can handle a stronger form of DLSS to help scale those things up. But we'll see what happens in April. Again, everything we're talking about here, pinch of salt, speculation. I am not talking about fact. I am just talking about the information that we have readily available that we can get for now. On top of that, there's also the I already kind of talked about it earlier, but it's the elephant in the room, which is basically Nintendo's Joy-Con issue. Now, I talked about earlier that I had an issue with the fact that the Joy-Con doesn't even charge anymore, and I have some problems that it's its own thing. But the bigger problem on the horizon that has been there for some time is the stick drift issue. And while I have not seen Nintendo maybe necessarily correct this issue, because to be fair, it's not an issue that only affects Nintendo. It happens on your PlayStation as well as your Xbox consoles as well. Stick drift does happen. It just happened to be a bit more catastrophic on the Nintendo end of things. But the fact that they are introducing a new type of clip system for the Joy-Cons obviously creates more factors for failure to happen, and I think what we need to see is maybe Nintendo improve on that there, because if we don't see Nintendo improve the core hardware design and eliminate or at least reduce the issue of stick drift, as well as try and get ahead of the actual issue with the actual Joy-Cons breaking from the snap magnetism, we might have a bit of a problem there. But again, this is just concerns I'm raising. I'm not saying these are things that are going to happen. I need to make that very clear. But does that mean the console is dead on arrival? Well, no. So what we need to see from Nintendo to pull this off, well, it's quite simple. We need to see a few simple key things. We need to see maybe a little bit more raw horsepower inside the actual unit itself. But if we don't even factor that in, we need to see Nintendo improve its relations with third-party developers. Don't get me wrong, the Switch has been way better with its support with third-party developers, and let me tell you, it's not as bad as the Wii was when it came to shovelware galore. But we do need to see potentially more ports coming over to the Nintendo to try and benefit Nintendo's stake in sort of the business that is console gaming. Now, this is all factored and changed, and there's been an evolution of how we interpret and engage in consoles over the last year or so. Microsoft with the cloud gaming has absolutely been killing it. Now, you may not have a desire for cloud gaming, nor may it not work in your internet connection, depending on like how rural you are. It can be a little bit of a hit and miss thing. But the fact that Microsoft are able to start putting their games onto multiple different devices that aren't a Microsoft device, such as your TV, your mobile phone, they could potentially put this on the Switch as well, which means that opens them up to further gains in the third-party space. And it means that they can actually benefit from Microsoft's actual catalog without necessarily having to have the performance power or horsepower inside the unit to make sure the actual thing is sustainable and runnable. That's one way they get around that there. And I think stronger support from Microsoft in regards to cloud gaming and introducing more actual like methods to try and bring in games through other services is going to be how Nintendo makes themselves more viable against Sony and cooperatively against Microsoft in the larger scale long-term performance of the actual console. On top of that there, I know this has been said ad nauseum, but we need to see a revitalization of their older properties. There has been such a drought of some of the most beloved Nintendo properties over the last 10 years. Things like Mother or Earthbound, F-Zero, and Star Fox have pretty much not got a look in over the last wee while. And while we may have seen little nods and little cameos here in such of things as Smash Brothers, we don't necessarily have the big marquee games that we would love to see from the likes of a Mother or Earthbound, an F-Zero or a Star Fox. Now, mileage varies on that stuff, and I know Miyamoto is not typically overly interested in some of those properties, especially not Star Fox, considering how he handed that off during the GameCube era, but, you know, these are still properties that are beloved and still properties that hold a massive, massive amount of equity in gamers, especially of a certain generation that are going to buy the console. We got to give credit where credit's due though. Even with the desire for new IPs, we still need to see more. And it's not to say Nintendo hasn't done pretty well in the Switch era. Look at Splatoon. Splatoon has been a major success and a wonderful game that's been a great addition into the actual market when it comes to Nintendo, as well as its IP. It has been very, very well received to the point where we have 2 sequels in the one console that have sold incredibly well. But I would like to maybe see a little bit more partnership and innovation inside of their IPs if they're not going to make them outright new. More things like Mario and Rabbids, which was honestly a great game, and I would like to see more innovation in IPs. If we're going to not develop new IPs, at least more IPs that are involving third parties in a unique and fun and interesting way. We need to see more of that to kind of keep the console fresh, as well as ideas and those old IPs from stagnating. Don't get me wrong, I love a Mario game, but there's so many Super Mario Bros. Side scrollers you can play per generation before you just get a bit bored. On top of that there, when you stack them up with other things like Kirby and Donkey Kong and every other platform you have, you don't need a console that is platform heavy. We need to see variety in these IPs as well as new developed IPs as well. Now, when it comes down to it, do we think that Nintendo is going to basically have their console dead on arrival? No, it's not. It's Nintendo. Let's not be stupid here. They have made an absolute point of printing money. Ever since the Wii launched, that company has basically found the infinite money cheat. And, you know, don't get me wrong, Wii U was a little bit but at the end of the day, we still saw great innovations and strides as well as sales inside the Switch. Even with the lack of maybe innovation, there's still something to be said there. And while I think there is definitely some equity with the IPs that we have inside of Nintendo, there is going to be stiffer competition coming in from the handheld space, especially from the PC market. But I think Nintendo needs to be really smart in how they approach this. Let's say we approach this. I'm not part of Nintendo, but how Nintendo approaches this, because at the end of the day, like I said before, there is the slight lingering menace that is emulators. As much as Nintendo wants to try and stop them from existing, they sadly can't. The internet always finds a way, and in many countries it is completely legal to have copies of your purchased games and to be able to play them. So it's hard to say they're going to get around that one, but it is something they'll need to try and work on. I would love to hear your thoughts, though. These are just some of the things I've been thinking about over the last wee while when it comes to Nintendo Switch. Drop us a comment down below. Let me know what you think could be improved or what you would like to see from the Nintendo Switch 2. If you've enjoyed the video, of course, you can hit the like button and also drop us a subscribe. That way you don't miss out on any of our further videos coming out. Top of that there, we're live. We go live on Twitch at twitch.tv/SPVG, as well as YouTube here on the channel simultaneously. You can always come in, drop your thoughts, your feelings, hang out with us and chat away. But anyway, guys, I'm John. I've had a great time talking to you, and if we're lucky, we'll see you on the next video or the next live stream. Have a good one. Peace.